You're entering a world, one that is different to ours yet eerily similar. You're about to trek beyond the boundaries of normalcy and sanity. A place where the impossible is made probable, and the universe that is home to loads of wild creations. Creations such as satanic Christians and impregnable aliens. You're about to trek into the weirdest place imaginable. You're about to go into Simpsons Halloween specials. Horror, a genre that has entertained, terrified, and fascinated audiences for decades. It's a style of film that has helped to create some of cinema's all-time classics, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and my personal favourite, A Quiet Place. These well-made and successful movies have been as popular as they have been because it has been able to produce many different subgenres, such as psychological, slasher, zombie, and whatever the this is. Stories from this genre have also entertained audiences' brains through the realm of the internet with creepypastas, and television with shows such as Inside Number 9, American Horror Story, and is that the Elephant Man? Godzilla? Oh, it's Anthony Perkins. Yeah, he was Norman Bates in Psycho. These are not the only shows to have done something like this. In fact, there is one TV series that isn't exactly horror-based, it's just done a horror-themed episode once a year for pretty much longer than most of the planet has been alive. It's a series that has received multiple awards, has had a feature-length film, released countless merchandise, and has even received condemnation from a former US president. I am of course talking about The Simpsons and their infamous long-running segment, Treehouse of Horror. This has been a huge staple of the show for decades. Every year the series leaves the usual realm of its own reality and enters the world of the weird, strange and obscure. The characters are put into situations ranging from the odd to the terrifying, and we get to see themes that often can't be explored in the family-friendly episodes, even going as far as to have pre-episode warnings at the start of the specials. In the earlier editions, the stories didn't shy away from the outright horrifying and disturbing images that would have had an impact on you growing up and absolutely make a 9-year-old struggle to sleep at night. Definitely didn't happen to me. I should not have been allowed to watch TV. There are skits where the family members are flat out killed, Homer tries to murder his own children on more than one occasion, there's brutal transformations, and even stories that pay homage and even parody old horror movies. By the way, remember that word parody. It's going to come up a lot in this video, for some good reasons, but mostly bad ones. As time progressed, however, the quality of these episodes would start to decline, and just like Frankie Muniz' career, it would start going downhill around the late 2000s. In a similar light to the show itself, Treehouse of Horror would eventually become a parody of itself and become heavily reliant on parodies and celebrity cameos. There would later be skits that were flat out parodies of James Cameron's Avatar, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and you even had forced election stories. How did this happen though? How did Treehouse of Horror go from scary and brilliantly written to borderline terrible episodes that would give me second-hand embarrassment? It's early 90s, The Simpsons is just starting and it is immensely popular. The show is getting tens of millions of views per episode, has sold out countless merch and is a media sensation. I don't think I need to explain what it's about. In 1990 the series began its very long running segment, Treehouse of Horror, and tried something a bit different. It was a new way to attract more audiences to the show. These features would focus on 3 short stories and would be based around trying to scare viewers. The Simpsons is now currently in the middle of its 34th season and has produced 33 Halloween specials. Now, when you're doing a video like this, you would need to do your research so you can have a pretty clear idea of what you're talking about. So, I watched all of them. Every single one. I watched all of the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episodes. I watched 12 hours of Simpsons content for this video. Let me tell you, it was excruciating. I amassed 25 pages worth of notes for this video. That is a very clear cry for help. One thing that stood these earlier episodes out from the later ones is that horror was a genuine theme in the stories and the writers actually tried to make people afraid. As previously mentioned, there were warnings at the beginnings of each of these that were given by the characters.
Things like the following half hour. Nothing seems to bother my kids, but tonight's show, which I totally wash my hands of, is really scary. So if you have sensitive children, maybe you should tuck them into bed early tonight instead of writing us angry letters tomorrow.
Ugh, great. A woke younger generation that can't learn how to handle a joke. God, people are so sensitive nowadays. Also, how dare you make fun of the Queen's death? No, I don't see the irony in that at all. God save the king. These pre-episode warnings were actually a sign of more conservative times on television, back when things like Christianity had more of a grip on the country's media, and as a result, shows like The Simpsons, which regularly got views from younger audiences, had to have these warnings at the start of every episode. The series was able to do as well as it did in the 90s because it stood out from the very conservative status quo at the time. Of course, many conservatives in the media do want to go back to that time, however we don't have censors on TV anymore, given that we basically have incitements of violence against immigrants and trans people on Fox News on a daily basis. I'm going to take a few minutes out to talk about the first Treehouse of Horror, because it's the first one the series ever did, and as a result I think it's the most important one. After the warning from Marge, we're given a creepy intro of gravestones and storms in an attempt to creep our audiences, and in my opinion it does do a good job. We then cut to Bart and Lisa in a treehouse. You get it, everyone? Because it's called Treehouse? The two of them are telling each other scary stories whilst Homer listens from outside. The first one is called Bad Dream House and focuses on the family moving into a new place that's haunted. Throughout the skit you can see tributes to old horror and thriller films from the 60s and 70s, such as Psycho and Poltergeist. Even though this is a comedy show, there are genuine attempts to scare you, even through the use of colour and disturbing noises. However, as this is a comedy show, you also have to have a few jokes in there as well, and I'm sure that there are absolutely no jokes from the 1990s that have not aged well. I'm sure that nothing is going to be considered inappropriate by today's standards. Let's watch as I have a conveniently timed sip of water from this mug with Tommy Wiseau's face on it.
This kitchen certainly could use a woman's touch.
What the fuck? It was the 90s, used to love Little Britain and now you can't stand it. Let it go. I really hope none of that didn't get on the camera. The other two are in similar vein to this. The second one is called Hungry Are the Damned, and it pays tribute to the alien subgenre. The family are kidnapped by Kang and Kodos, and they think that they're about to be eaten. There are many twists and turns to the skit that are genuinely well written. However, there is one problem with this. Alien storylines are a huge part of horror history because they focus on fear of the unknown and they expose humans' biggest insecurities, and they reveal that we tend to have hatred for others that aren't ourselves. They reveal that beneath all of the illusions of progress we seem to be making, society will never accept difference and will always try to seal ourselves off from acceptance and reality. Definitely can't tie that into the modern day. And The Simpsons basically used that to say, haha, he's holding the ship down because he's fat. It was the 90s, let it go, just let it go. And now we're on to our final skit, which parodies Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, a story about a man being haunted by this black bird that is supposed to represent his deceased wife. At the time of its release, it terrified readers. This plot had a good mix of horror and comedy, and I especially love this bit.
Suddenly came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door.
To some visitor.
I muttered.
Tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more.
Are we scared yet? Bard, he's establishing mood.
A lot of horror filmmakers really need to understand that. There's way more to fear and thriller than just jump scares all the time. So that was the one that started it all. Over the next decade, otherwise known as the Golden Age of The Simpsons, Treehouse of Horror would continue to entertain audiences. However, sooner rather than later, cracks would begin to form. The next episode focused on nightmares and gave audiences a good journey into the character's psyche, and Jesus Christ, that smile is terrifying! We're starting to see more homages to classic horror and thrillers of the time, such as The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits. Also, I just want to say that I'm pretty sure Homer's nightmare is an allegory for capitalism. I even included that in my notes, which I was making as the story progressed. Parodies and homages were beginning to be a regular thing in these segments, which would have been good at the time, but eventually, as I went on, I began to suspect that maybe this was all this show had. But at the time I didn't really think about it because The Simpsons were doing something weird. And I like weird. Like in Treehouse of Horror 3 where they parodied King Kong, which makes sense since monsters were a huge staple of the horror genre at the time. They also included zombies and had a skit where Bart enters a cursed item shop. Insert Rick and Morty clip here. Actually no, to the future version of me, don't include that Rick and Morty clip where he enters the cursed item shop. I know you're going to do it. I know you've just done an episode on Rick and Morty. You don't want to include clips from the same show twice in a row, do you? Come on now, you're better than this. Please don't do it. It will be extremely frustrating if you...
Then perhaps you could make use of this. This microscope reveals things beyond comprehension.
Grandpa, go home and drink.
At the time, the parodies that the show was making were really good, and they helped to attract viewers to these episodes, like when they did a mock-up of... Twilight? Yeah, I think that's Twilight, let's go with that. And The Shining. Sorry, what I meant to say was...
You've got the shinin.
You mean shining?
Shh, you wanna get sued?
Okay, I'm gonna have to start glossing over these episodes, otherwise this video is going to be longer than the list of reasons that GB News will be attacking me if I ever become famous. But before I do, I would just like to give a shout out to my favourite Treehouse of Horror skit of all time from episode number 5, Nightmare Cafeteria. The scene focuses on children at Springfield Elementary School going missing, and it's revealed that it's because the teachers and
Skinner!
have been eating them. You slowly see them grow a disturbing fascination with the students, as well as them becoming progressively overweight. Chaos ensues once this is revealed, and Milhouse falls into a giant blender.
I'm going to enjoy devouring you, Bart Simpson. Yes, I believe I'll start as you've so often suggested by eating your shorts.
That might be the creepiest thing I've ever heard. I mean, bravo, but Jesus Christ, Matt Groening! The story concludes with a brilliant ending as well. A scary fog arrives at the family's house and it turns their skin inside out, and it leads to a very, very disturbing performance at the end that still gives me shivers down my spine.
Just one sniff of that fog and you're inside out. It's worse than that flesh-eating virus you've read about.
This is what I would consider to be the peak of Treehouse of Horror episodes. Even though Season 12 is widely regarded as the best the show ever did, I would say that this is when the Halloween specials were at their best and creepiest, because it never got better than this. The later episodes in this era would follow along these lines, but were not as good as the earlier ones. They delved into the world of unsettling graphics, political commentary, possession by hair transplant, no, seriously, and this horrible skit that was way more disturbing than I remember. Yeah, not as enjoyable in my adulthood now that I actually understand what I'm reading and seeing. Kind of like the lyrics to Sweet Home Alabama. Over time, The Simpsons would remain popular and would get tens of millions of views per episode, but cracks were starting to show in the surface. It was clear that the golden age of the show was over, and with Treehouse of Horror, even though many of the skits were entertaining, the old ways were starting to die out very, very fast. As previously mentioned, Season 12 is often considered to be the best one in the show's history, and now we're slowly devolving into an era that many fans call Zombie Simpsons, in which the corpse of the show is decaying but is somehow still moving around. And the same thing can be said for Treehouse of Horror. Remember when I said that the word parody was going to be brought up a lot in this video? Yeah, there's a reason for that. A lot of these sketches are parodies of or tributes to old horror and fantasy stories, which can be good at first, but it's starting to get very old very quickly. And it's starting to become pretty clear that this is all the writers are depending on. It all starts with Treehouse of Horror 10 and their parody of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Here the family accidentally run over Ned Flanders, causing him to turn into a werewolf.
Oh no! Ned Flanders!
He's dead!
I like the parody here, but it's starting to get frustrating. At least you have some genuinely good skits though, with one such as Night of the Dolphin, which is so messed up it actually scared me as a child. The story focuses on dolphins taking over control of the land, as it's revealed that they used to live there before humans pushed them into the sea. This scared me the most because of the image at the end. Dead people floating face down in the water. Imagine 10-year-old me seeing that for the first time, and then you'll understand why I'm so desensitized to online horror. Night of the Dolphin seems to be a very weird mixture of Free Willy and Jaws. And next week we've got Peppa Pig meets Saving Private Ryan.
Peppa Pig.
Also, I just want to give a quick shout out to what is easily the funniest death in Treehouse of Horror.
It's dolphins. We have to stop them. If we speak in low-frequency voices, I don't think they can... Ow!
Also, this is different to their other Halloween specials because it was released in... Sorry. So it was the first one of the new millennium, however though this one was unfortunately released on the 1st of November, so not exactly Halloween. Good job guys! This era did try something a bit different with its genres, which I can appreciate, but these are supposed to be horror specials. I can appreciate it if they're actually going to use them to try and scare people. Like when a parody of 2001 A Space Odyssey was produced in which a machine voiced by Pierce Brosnan tries to brutally kill Homer so he can seduce Marge. Or when the writers decided to reimagine H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, wherein the inhabitants of Springfield are being turned into animals by Dr. Hibbert, which I might add has this amazing moment.
All you can do is eat and sleep and mate and roll around in your own filth and mate and eat. Where do I sign up?
In my opinion, the last truly great Treehouse of Horror skit was from episode 15 with the Ned Zone, in which Ned Flanders gets hit on the head with a bowling ball and it gives him the ability to see into the future.
Do me! Do me!
Not only is it a good psychological thriller, but it leads way to some great comedy as well, like when Ned's prediction for Homer's death comes true and the entire town gets destroyed. I will forever love this bit.
Homer, fall backward! Oh, you stupid son of a...
These are really good skits, but they do represent the end of the best times for this series. Parodies and mockery soon overtook these episodes and they slowly gave up being scary. I think this is probably to do with the lack of need for warnings and censors that were not prevalent as they used to. TV was changing and the excitement to terrify audiences was no longer there. I guess it's safe to say that this is why the gore was dialed back. Audiences were becoming desensitized and the high was no longer there. You had skits like The Right to Creep and Scare Arms, which is just a gun story with zombies, and Stop the World, I Want to Goof Off, which involves Bart and Milhouse breaking a time stopper. One of the earliest shorts I remember is a parody of the superhero genre, where Bart and Lisa get powers and have to rescue Xena from the comic book guy. This is just a mockery of superheroes and the creepy nerds of the 90s and not horror. Yes, I can understand wanting to try something different, but maybe this could be resolved by creating a separate anthology style episode where you can make stories that don't focus on scary things. Kind of like Futurama's Anthology of Interest, which was created by the same guys who made The Simpsons. Anthology of Interest allows the writers to do stuff that they wouldn't be able to get away with in the normal episodes. It can be a good excuse to try out sci-fi and spy stuff, and it can lead to Treehouse of Horror continuing to be a good bit of light in the midst of a dying show. These episodes are no longer focused on scaring people. I understand that you want to try something a bit different every now and then, but that's not what horror is. It's just a piss take of non-scary films that have been entertaining in the past. It's like an extra long Saturday Night Live skit that no one really asked for. We're now at the time where Simpsons episodes are breeding faster than Kennedy rabbit hybrids. Yeah, I can include that in the script. We are very well past the height of popularity for this series, and the age of these episodes is really beginning to show. So what the hell happened? Like I said, these episodes are being churned out faster than Reddit posts whenever the users on that site discover a new meme. In fact, the name of this part of the episode comes from Red Dwarf Season 2 Episode 2 Better Than Life, in which the crew of the ship discover a whole bunch of mail that's been delivered to them over the last 3 million years, and Lester finds an old Friday the 13th movie.
There's everything here, all the mail, entertainment cassettes, a new batch of movies.
Yo, the new Friday the 13th movie? Friday the 13th part 1649?
This is obviously a mockery of how many of those films were being made, and The Simpsons is starting to become that. The ratings for these episodes are starting to decline, and in my opinion, it really should have ended after the movie. The film was pretty decent, and you could have had a good show that people will admit started to decline in its final few seasons, but would have had a solid good record. Now it churns out more seasons than the UK government produces Prime Ministers and Chancellors in a single year. The later seasons of The Simpsons would become repetitive and annoying. There's only so many times you can poke fun at pop culture before people start getting into something else.
Good Lord, what is happening in there?
Other cartoons were becoming popular around this time, such as South Park, Futurama, aka my favourite show of all time, and
Family Guy.
Brian.
Audiences had newer content to watch, and that list would only get longer with the rise of the internet, and on that internet you'd find videos of people complaining that a cartoon from the 80s and 90s is nowhere near as good as it used to be. Hey, hang on a second! Treehouse of Horror is starting to decline in quality by this point as well. However, the intro to 16 was so unexpected, it was genuinely hilarious. Kenga Kodos just slap a sticky note on the screen and let it go from there. This was a brilliant start to the episode, but it was the only saving grace, because the next skit involved the family getting a new robot son and realising that they loved it even more than Bart. And just like I previously mentioned, there is a growing lack of horror in these skits. There is one exception here, but I'll touch on that near the end of the section. There's one that's a straight up parody of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but with Homer and Marge, and you also have a mockery of Transformers where Lisa gets a toy car for Christmas and it turns evil. Also, this happens.
Melody.
Oh god, that's supposed to be mocking trans women, isn't it? It was the 2000s, you could... Actually, no, I'm not going to let that go, okay? Bigotry and transphobia and racism have never been funny, and including jokes like that in your show only help to contribute to societal views of already oppressed minority groups. Transphobia has never been funny, and it is completely irresponsible to hide behind the defense of the past, because I'm pretty sure there were people back then who thought it was wrong too. If you can't make jokes without already punching down at already oppressed people, that's not comedy, it's bullying. Political correctness isn't the reason why people aren't laughing at your jokes anymore. You're just not funny. Whew, okay, rant over. Now I can talk about one of my biggest problems with this era, and that is the fact that these are supposed to be horror skits and they're supposed to scare people, but they have a habit on ending on a really cheesy joke or an information segment, which I can get behind if they actually had anything to do with the episode at hand, and none of them ever did. Treehouse of Horror 16 was a good example of this. Even though I've talked about how much I love the intro, the skits were not that good in my opinion. I previously talked about the first one, which was a parody of science fiction stories about technology turning on us and becoming evil. Interesting concept, except it ends on a tribute to The Exorcist that made no sense whatsoever. It brought down the quality of the skit, and it really was a sign that things were changing with the show. The overall episode ends with an appeal to adults who can't read, which had absolutely nothing to do with the episode at hand, and they decided to include Dennis Rodman in there? What does that have to do with the episode? That's not even funny, let alone scary. Number 17, which was released a year before the movie came out, also had a situation like this. There was a sketch that was a mockery of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast in 1938. In our lifetime there was mass panic and people genuinely thought that their world was under attack. This is the same situation here, and the aliens do arrive, no one believes it, and it's all revealed to be a discussion on the Iraq War.
We had to invade. They were working on weapons of mass disintegration.
Sure they were.
You could have had a genuinely good bit of social commentary here, but you had to ruin it by outright saying it. This would have been like that scene in Don't Look Up where Leonardo DiCaprio's character finally snaps, and he doesn't seem to understand why no one is taking the threat of the comet seriously. He just turns to the camera and goes, "By the way, this film's about climate change, just I thought you might not have known. Or if in The Matrix Neo turned straight to the camera and said, "Hey everyone, did you know that these are supposed to be an allegory for estrogen?" I can't believe I have to say this, but if you want to do good social commentary, don't mention the thing you're trying to commentate on. Oh my god! Okay, so it's pretty clear in this point that the quality is really starting to decline, and Treehouse of Horror is becoming reliant on references, parodies, and jokes that had absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the skit. The one time in this era that they did try something original was that one time where Homer consumes an alien parasite that just makes him fatter and fatter and is just completely gross. Kind of like that dragon episode of Rick and Morty. It's disgusting for the sake of being disgusting. Weirdly enough though, there is a saving grace to this, and that comes in the form of the intro to Treehouse of Horror 20. This episode came out in 2009. The intro pays homage to universal monsters such as Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, and Dracula. There is a fight involved that ends with Homer literally being decapitated and his eyes having an X each to symbolise that this is the 20th special. This is a genuinely scary image to sear into the mind of 12-year-old me. I'm not going to try and make this skit too long, so I'm just going to give quick reviews of my favourite skits from this era. Don't worry, I've got some good reviews. We have a black and white Alfred Hitchcock homage featuring Bart and Lisa getting revenge on their teachers, which was brilliant and kept me in suspense the entire time because I had no idea how it was going to end. There was also a mixture between Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later, which was a very clear mockery of the popularity of zombie movies at the time, but it did very well, and we ended on a story of Moe torturing Homer for his blood so he could trick Marge into falling in love with him, and it's staged like a play. Wow, okay, turns out there is a good way to write torture. Too bad Spiral didn't take any notes from this. Whew. Okay, now that that era's out of the way, we are starting to notice a drastic change in these episodes. There are some very good moments, but much like that lettuce in the back of your fridge, you're denying how bad it's actually getting until the very last moment, and there's a smell now emanating through your kitchen. Clean out your fridge! We are now entering a period in the history of Treehouse of Horror that I can only describe as the good, the bad, and the really weird. Because we still have 12 more of these episodes to get through.
Good grief.
How do you think I feel, Bart? I had to sit through all of these. It's the early 2010s and we are now very far into an era of the show that I previously mentioned called Zombie Simpsons. It is widely debated when this time began. Most people say around season 9 or season 10, whereas others like myself believe that it began after the movie. In fact, Captain Midnight has a very good video about the Simpsons movie and how it represented the peak of the show and how the episodes from there onwards were not as good as they used to be, and this can very clearly be shown in the IMDb ratings for them. That black dot there at the end of season 23 is the one that has Lady Gaga as a guest. I wonder what the lowest rated Treehouse of Horror sketch is.
It's raining! The old people will head to the TV room and watch the Weather Channel.
That's not rain, it's Grandpa.
Oh. Yeah, okay, I can see why that's the lowest. Isn't that the same one where Homer beats Cthulhu in a pie-eating contest? I swear I keep saying weirder and weirder things with each passing video. We're now in a very strange period for these specials. You know how in most horror movies you need a really good opening scene to get audience's attention, like in Saw or It or The Conjuring? Yeah, that's pretty much what Treehouse of Horror was relying on from now on. Because the skits, with a few exceptions and they will be talked about, are really bad. A lot of the intros are brilliantly made with references to Universal monsters, the fact that they got Guillermo del Toro to help with the one for 24, which was easily the best one by far. It's full of tributes and monsters throughout the entire thing, not to mention new styles of animation were tried out, like this borderline terrifying one where they made it look like the family is a mixture between Charlie Brown and Crash Bandicoot. The intros like number 24 actually gave people the idea that these episodes were starting to improve and they were slowly becoming watchable again. I know that I've mentioned that I'm annoyed at all of the references and parodies in this video, but 24's intro is really good because they tie in seamlessly with the sequence and it comes off as a tribute to good horror movies that inspired Treehouse of Horror and Guillermo del Toro to begin with. I also made a list of the intro's monster and movie references in my notes. Hang on a second. There's quite a few good ones in here. Like for example, World War Z, Alfred Hitchcock, Edgar Allan Poe, Nosferatu, The Fly, Milk, Cheddar, Bread, Leeks, Potatoes, Cumberland Salt. Wait, what is my shopping list doing here? Also, in episode number 23, there's a skit called The Greatest Story Ever Told, and the first note I made for this is, don't make a sex joke, don't make a sex joke, don't make a sex joke. I'm 25 years old and I have a full-time job. By this point, it's pretty clear that the writers have just run out of ideas and they're picking up on the most popular trend in the media or film at the time. They do try and bring back a bit of their old horror styles, but this time it just comes off as incredibly desperate and borderline cringeworthy. And it's shown with number 21 and this amazing line in its intro.
Beneath this smile, I'm in awful, awful pain!
So we open up on a story that involves a board game being cursed by the devil, which sounds like a very interesting idea that I can get along with. Let's see what it has in store.
Maybe I'm just tired of living.
Oh, okay. There's a lot to unpack there. Holy crap. That's just done for shock, isn't it? Like, you thought that the best way to go back to horror was just brutally kill two very, very harmless religious children. Oh boy. Even if they did try to bring back the original horror flavour, it all feels for nothing because the previous stories have almost been entirely focused on parodies and it took a good chunk of the joy away. There's also a short in this episode that's a direct parody of... Dracula? I think that's Dracula, but I'm also getting a Mean Girls vibe here as well. Hang on, wasn't this in a Paramore video? Are the Simpsons ripping off Paramore now? Jesus Christ, they really have run out of ideas. There's even a short story that's not even horror, it's just a plain rip-off of Avatar that has the same music playing on repeat throughout the entire battle, and Bart, a 10-year-old child, impregnates someone. Someone call the police on Matt Groening. There's also a story in which Homer becomes paralysed after a spider bite and he can only communicate with his family through one method. I'm gonna let you guess which one it is. Is it A, Morse code, B, sign language, or C, farts? Write your guesses in the comment section below. It's farts. Of course it's farts! Did you know this show has won over 100 TV awards? Interestingly though, this episode also has this line in the intro.
This is exactly why kids need a union.
Comrade Bart? So these sketches at this point are borderline anger-inducing. There are a few good ones here and there, like when Ned is a secret serial killer, a tense story where Homer tries to kill a man he suspects Marge is falling for, a Coraline tribute with the creepiest visuals in the entire thing. Jesus Christ, are they sewing their eyes shut and then killing themselves? And one where Bart becomes brain dead and is played around like a toy. That is a skit that Robot Chicken did in 2010, except this time it's being done with a 10-year-old. Holy crap!
He's the reason Jack won't come out of his box.
That and he's gay. Alright, that takes off my one obligatory gay joke. Right, what do I need to find next? Okay, before the video ends, I have to find some kind of reference to Richard Nixon. Weirdly enough though, we are able to find some light in the darkness, even if it does feel like the darkness is becoming incredibly overpowering sometimes. Jesus Christ, that's the most emo thing I've ever said. The scenes in these episodes are starting to become either really, really good or really, really bad. And with the really, really good ones, they're pretty damn good. They usually come in the middle of the episodes. My favourite one of this era is a mockery of The Exorcist, where Maggie gets possessed by a demon. I love this one because just like in the original film, the little girl is extremely rude and it is genuinely hilarious.
The chicken goes...
Someone's starting the terrible twos.
Someone's having an affair with his nurse.
Say
adulterer.
179.
Do you remember those lost episode creepypastas from like 2009 or 2010, where the story focused around someone finding a weird DVD and all the characters would be swearing or throwing blood around? Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's hilarious, but intentionally, since the writers are also trying to make people laugh as well as afraid. Well, not exactly afraid anymore. So what did make this era stand out from all the others in terms of its badness despite all the good skits in it? I've already discussed parodies in great detail in all the other sections of this video, but this era of the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror specials really stands out from the rest because of one simple thing. I mentioned it earlier on with the Iraq War and Kang and Kodos, and this is something that can be either brilliantly done if you do it well, or horribly cringeworthy if you write it poorly. I am of course talking about social commentary. Okay, one more part and I swear I'm going to get onto the conclusion for this video. One thing that The Simpsons has become known for over the years is how it's handled social issues. These episodes have ranged from topics such as same-sex relationships, the government system in general, religion, and also some really bad instances. Treehouse of Horror is no different to that. As previously mentioned, every 4 years there is an intro or skit about the upcoming election. Sometimes it could be good, like the one for 2008 where we learn that Homer is a liberal and he is brutally killed by the voting machine.
This doesn't happen in America! Maybe Ohio, but not in America!
They also do this in 2020 with Treehouse of Horror 31, which was right before that year's election. I know that since the whole world was talking about it, it would make sense to talk about the event, but given where the show and its writers have stood on many issues in the past, if you watch The Simpsons, you were pretty much settled on voting for Biden anyway. I do like how they added an apocalyptic theme here, so I guess this can be a saving grace. Also, this ending isn't that far off from how the aftermath actually turned out. I also love how it says democracy ends in 8 minutes. I can't think of a Western country that's also dealing with that issue right now. We all Democrats clearly like to lead us here. No problems here whatsoever. There's definitely no issues with our democracy and all of our leaders are very modern and liberal people. And that is Tory scumbag jab number 2 for this video. But there is another issue that I take offence at here, and that is the jokes that have been used over and over and over again. It's very similar to the I identify as an attack helicopter meme.
That's all right. I have 32 sexual identities.
You're not a tree, you're a plant. Yes, but I identify as a tree. I'm a transplant.
These were clearly used to mock the queer and trans community, and by having a show as big as The Simpsons use them, it's making more and more people believe that it's okay to say that against people like us. Also, they just suck. They're painfully unfunny. It's like that clip of Ted Cruz saying his pronouns are kiss my ass. The only acceptable response to a joke like that would be in the form of a facial expression that can only be described as Grandma at the Christmas table who just found out that her grandson does YouTube reaction videos for a living. Horror can be a Horror can be a great way of discussing social commentary. Rod Serling created the Twilight Zone so he could speak about the issues of his time, such as racism, sexism, and homophobia, in a way that would help him avoid censors, especially with things like the Hays Code in effect at the time. This is why so many minority groups like people of colour and the queer community are so attracted to this. Jordan Peele has been able to write some terrific commentary through his works with films like Get Out, which is about white communities trying to do what they can to control people of colour, even by extracting their own brains, and Nope, which is about how people try to document everything that happens in their own lives, even huge horrifying events for clout, even if it means we're literally about to die. There have been good moments of social commentary with these episodes, for example with the intro to 29, which decided to pay homage to its earlier episodes by bringing back the tombstones with dead celebrities and moments on it. On one of them it reads, "Thinking the Nazis are over." Oh boy, that's rough. They're back and they disturbingly won't stop getting more powerful, except this time they're not saying what they're doing until the very right moment, because for American Republicans, that moment is quite literally right now. And you also have that Parasite reference where Lisa tries to bring the working class together with some socialist elements, which they support, but then they freak out the moment they hear the word socialism.
Wait! If we all work together, regardless of class, we could finally change everything for the better.
Wow, that sounds great! Unless it's socialism.
Not totally, but certain aspects are similar to socialism.
Kill her!
That is what Fox News does to your brain. Social commentary can be very good to include in your works, as long as it's there for a reason. If it's not, then it's just forced and it serves absolutely no purpose. Okay, now that that's done, I can't help but wonder about all of this. The Simpsons is still going and Treehouse of Horror continues to be a massive part of it. I complain about these a lot, but the earlier segments are some of the best writing that I could possibly find. They are genuinely fantastic. They go outside the normal realms of the show and they actually attempt to terrify us. And I think that's why Treehouse of Horror had such a massive impact on me growing up. I know I've spent the majority of this video on Treehouse of Horror, but despite its downfall in quality over the last decade or so, weirdly enough, I kinda have to thank it. I've previously mentioned my absolute love of the horror genre and the many different kinds of ways that you can write it. The Babadook taught me that you can create a physical form of mental health issues like depression, Psycho taught me how to be scared of characters that might seem nice at first, and A Quiet Place told me that silence is the most terrifying thing that you can deal with. As I was writing this video, I realised that Treehouse of Horror was where my love for the genre originally started. The creepy images, the use of dark colours, the melding of our world and the supernatural, the use of gore, and how this genre can be used to poke fun at issues in society and our politics.
Silence! I give you the jury of the damned. Benedict Arnold, Lizzie Borden, Richard Nixon.
But I'm not dead yet. In fact, I just wrote an article for Redbook.
Hey, listen, I did a favor for you.
Yes, master.
Ha! Told you I could include a Nixon joke by the end. Horror has had a big impact on me growing up. It's a genre that I make fun of largely due to my hatred of jump scares and found footage, but as previously mentioned, there is so much that you can do with it, and The Simpsons knew that and took advantage of it. They saw a perfect opportunity to poke fun at Stephen King, David Cronenberg and Edgar Allan Poe, and even got creative with their censorship warnings. These skits have even inspired me to create ideas of my own. I'm not kidding, by the way, I have documents on my computer that are full of book, film and TV show ideas, and half of them are tied to horror in some way. One of those ideas is about a young girl who realises that she has the ability to see into the future and tries to stop bad things from happening, and it was inspired by Treehouse of Horror 15's The Ned Zone, which I talked about earlier. That's right, I have a story idea that's inspired by this!
Oh, you stupid son of a...
I will never get tired of that. Do I think the overall thing is nowhere near as good as it used to be? Yes. Do I still really enjoy the campy and over-the-top nature of the earlier episodes? Also yes. Does Nightmare Cafeteria from Treehouse of Horror 5 still creep me out to this day as a 25-year-old? Also yes. Do I think it's weird that Treehouse of Horror 31 opened up on a rendition of I'm Shipping Off to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys? Absolutely yes. There's no denying that the skits and jokes have been very popular with audiences throughout the years, and even though I'm very doubtful that the show will finally get cancelled in my lifetime, at least I still have something enjoyable to go back to every year that reminds me of a cartoon that I absolutely adored as a kid. At least we still have Treehouse of Horror.
No TV and no beer make Homer something something. Relax, I'm fine. But when I do die, I don't want any autopsies.
How could you not tell me you were an assassin?
How could you not tell me?
I told you 20 times. You never listen.
Well, they're not as pretty as you, Marge.
Have all the donuts in the world!
More bread, please.